All right. I think I might be live. Um, so, hello. Yeah, it's great to be here and great to see everyone coming in. Javi from North Carolina, Alex. Oh, yay, someone from Sheffield, UK. Greetings. So I just wanted to see if maybe we could start with a little bit of basic meditation. And we'll do maybe a little bit of shamatha. And before we get into it, from what I understand, the group is comprised of people from a wide variety of practice traditions and a wide variety of practice experience. Um, and I thought that maybe kind of coming back to just a formal introduction to shamatha um, as an opening practice might be, a nice way to start. Um, Hello, Kate. And I also want to say that Lama Rod had something come up today, so he couldn't join us as a co-teacher. But I know that he's here with us in spirit, and I'll try and channel him as best I can. So the instructions. Hi, Indrani. The instructions for shamatha, or shine, as it's called in Tibetan, are very basic. So there's the basic physical posture, and again, as I was saying last week, we don't have to be obsessive about the physical posture so much. Our bodies are quite different, and some people will jump right into lotus position or and whatnot very easily. Other people can't do that, and that's fine. It's not that you need to sit in lotus position or vajrasana in order to do this meditation. As I said before, it could be done laying down. It could be done any which way. But the kind of traditional aspect of the practice is to adopt a posture. They say comprising the 7 points of Varachana. And the first is to have your legs. If one were to do that in Vajra or Vajrasana or Vajra posture, or you could just sit, regularly with your legs folded. You could also conceivably kneel, like in the Zen tradition. And your hands in the meditation mudra, on your lap, if that feels good. The other thing you can do is to put your hands on your knees, if that feels good as well. And the kind of larger point with the body is to allow our body to kind of settle. So just as Rod has opened up many of the sessions with this, touching the earth kind of internal dynamic. That's kind of what this practice is doing. We're kind of settling into the experience of our body, right? And so our hands in the posture or mudra meditation, and they say shoulders should be spread like an eagle, and so that kind of means that they should be splayed outward in a comfortable way, but open. Your chest should be kind of as open as possible. We want to avoid tightness in the body because there is a correlation between tightness in the body and tightness in the mind. We've got so many people from the Pure Land of Brooklyn. That's beautiful. And your neck slightly bent like a hook. So just, slightly, your chin slightly downward. And they say your spine should be as straight as an arrow. And of course, again, we're kind of doing this as best one can. There should be absolutely no value judgment on whether you can't do this, that you're not going to be a proficient meditator, or that realization isn't going to be an option. That's not the way it works. And then eyes kind of gazing into space. And they say about 4 fingers from your nose. I always found that to be distracting as an instruction. And actually, my root teacher, Tsunma Dechinzangmo, suggested just gazing fully into space in front of us. So we don't need to kind of, try and figure out what 4 fingers from our nose is. And then the lips and teeth relaxed. So we want our jaw to be relaxed, right? We're not trying to be clenched up and tight. And the tongue resting, very gently above the upper palate of your mouth. And that actually has kind of a relationship to more intense hatha yoga practices. And that's where that comes from. So again, you just try and settle your body, hands on your knees or meditation mudra, chest open, neck slightly bent, lips relaxed, breathing relaxed. And so we'll sit like this for a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes. And there's a phrase actually around in the Tibetan tradition around placing the mind, right? So just as much as we're placing the body in a kind of aspect of stability, we want to place the mind so that it can be fresh and free, right? Not obsessive, relaxed, and capable of meeting whatever arises at any given time in the moment. And just let your breath arise naturally, without any judgment, without any concerns about the degree of whether or not, it's meaningful or not meaningful. Just let your breath happen, let your body happen, and let your mind happen without judgment. So we'll just settle like this for a couple of moments. And then shamatha meditation is really a way of developing stability. Sometimes it's translated as quiescence of mind, stillness. And sometimes this is done through a variety of ways of again, anchoring the mind, letting the mind kind of come to rest. And in the beginning, it can be helpful to just allow ourselves to remain aware of our breath, every inhalation and every exhalation. You don't have to count it. Just notice. Notice inhale, notice exhale. Notice inhale, notice exhale. There are no goals. There's nowhere to arrive. We just stay in the moment with our body, our breath, and our mind arising naturally. Do this for a couple moments. We'll do it for 4 minutes. If you become distracted, that's okay. Just bring your awareness back to your breath. Allow your body to remain stable. If you can, try and sit with the gravity of a mountain. Again, allow your mind to be gentle, pliant, flexible, and able to stabilize without distraction. Try and let your body rest, your mind rest. And then slowly allow yourself to bring yourself back to the screen, back to the community. Oh, there's someone from Panama, Washington, D.C., Georgia. I want to again thank you for joining me today. And for those who just joined, Mahamudra had something come up in his schedule, so he's not going to be here right now for this session. But it's likely that these sessions will continue to some form or another, some degree or another, into the future. So we're not going anywhere. So I want to maybe just start off with a little bit of check-in. If there are questions from last week's session, I want to just allow people to ask anything based on their experience over the past week. I don't know if people have been playing around with the meditation instructions, and at least my memory of the session last week was we were really kind of getting to some great questions rooted in and around different ways that the instructions might be hard or need to be tailored. And I think it's important for us to be able to look at how to take meditation instructions that might be passed down generation after generation from 10th century India, as this one was, with and still allow it to remain fresh and supple and pliant, so that it applies to not only our time but then to us individually, with full acknowledgement of the fact that who we are individually right now is going to change and is constantly changing. So the instruction, one's relationship to these instructions now will be different in 6 months will be different in a year, different from that, 5 years down the line. Um, and that's there's beauty in that, because all of a sudden something like this, these 6 nails from Talopa, and I'll review them again for anybody who wasn't in the last session. Um, it's almost like a constant revelation. We're able to engage, see something new, experience something new, uh, have a realization that arises that's new, and then 6 months later, something new will arise. So there's always change, there's always growth, which is encouraging, and beautiful. And so I can say I first encountered these instructions 25 years ago in Asia, and they were one thing then, and really now they're like they're like my orange sweatshirt, which I'm not wearing right now, but which people say I wear all the time, and has become just part of me. They're like a comfortable quilt. They're just something very beautiful and soothing. So we have a couple questions come in. And so the first one is from Alex, and he writes, I've started trying to practice Tilopa 6 nails as part of a regular meditation routine since last week. Do you have a recommendation for the best kind of container for doing this practice regularly on my own? For example, 5-minute sessions, 20-minute sessions, long sits, using it with a shamatha practice. So I'll do the, thank you for the question, Alex. I'll do the kind of last part first. So this instruction is intended upon kind of being seated upon some kind of shamatha practice. So when I say some kind of shamatha practice, I mean a meditation practice that allows our mind to kind of slow down a little bit. Our minds, as I'm sure we've all experienced just today, are frenetic, right? They're moving all the time. They relate to visual culture. They relate to auditory culture. They relate to our sense of smell and taste. And again, as we find in the 6 nails, our ideas about the past, ideas about the future. Our mind is constantly moving. And shamatha and similar kinds of practices allow our mind to kind of settle, so that then when we practice these instructions, a different kind of experience can kind of settle in rather than distraction. So rather than kind of jumping right into an unending trail of distraction, we allow our minds to settle through shamatha or a similar kind of meditation. And then these instructions are a way of massaging or unlocking our experience of mind in the moment. As for how long one does the practice, there are many ways of approaching this. And I think the most important thing is to be flexible, so that we're not saying, okay, I'm going to do, 2 45-minute sessions a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and then that's it. The moment we kind of make anything that's it, things start getting artificial. I am a big fan of 5 to 15-minute sessions. They allow us to have more sessions during a day, conceivably. And then the increased frequency allows us to kind of jump back into an experience of spaciousness more consistently throughout the day than if we do, 1 45-minute session a day, and then we interact with somebody with whom we have a difficult relationship, and then we completely lose our shit. And then, the next, formal place of practice where we kind of touch into the nature of mind isn't until the evening. So 5 minutes are good. 5 minutes is great at work. It's a lot easier to take a 5-minute break than a 20-minute break. But if you could take a 20-minute break, go ahead and do that. And again, practice gently so that you can settle back into the experience of the moment. And the thing, that we need to kind of keep in mind is that these practices, the ease and the relative quote unquote success of these practices has a lot to do with how we conceive of them. So if we think that I'm adding something to my experience by doing this, that's a lot different, and maybe not as accurate about the nature of mind than if we say that I'm going to allow myself to settle into the nature of mind through this practice and basically break the cycle of ordinary samsaric, suffering that we go through all the time. So if you can settle yourself into an experience of increased spaciousness in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes and do that 4 times a day, that's actually a little bit more effective in terms of just breaking the habit of just this kind of ego clinging that goes on relentlessly through the day. Go down to the next question. Hello from London, and thank you so much for these sessions. You said something last week about taking the reins and saying, I'm going my own way. How do we square with the individualism of going our way with letting go of our sense of self? So yeah, the I'm going my own way. The intention behind that statement last week is that I'm going my own way through samsara, not in the sense of I'm going to trailblaze the new path and not care for lineage, not care for even not care for training to some extent. Like I have gone through periods of being wanting to push at tradition, like, oh man, this is such a bummer, it's so slow, it's so old fashioned, blah blah blah, and try and push my way through it, and sometimes that's a good thing because tradition can be really ineffective. It can be full of abuse. It doesn't necessarily always rise to the needs of the moment and the needs of people in the moment. And addressing that is very different than just saying, like, screw it all, I'm going to invent my own system. So I'm not saying that. There is something very healthy, I think, in struggling with tradition to some extent. And I'm not an advocate for some kind of sadistic or masochistic relationship to power at all. But sometimes it's our ego, as I think you rightly point out, Sam, that wants us to go, in a totally individualistic way. But what I'm pointing out here is that rather than that, we should have agency around our authentic practice. And so that sometimes means that I'm taking these 6 instructions and I'm moving in this direction with it because this seems like a real juicy vein of practice. And it's important to remember that at least, like as you find in the Tibetan tradition, where we have these texts called Lam Rim, like stages and paths, that the whole path theoretically to enlightenment or awakening and liberation is delineated. But that delineated path is, even though it's presented in a particular way, it's not necessarily only that way. That's the kind of general guideline for liberation. Some people are kind of leap over kinds of people who just will kind of have a natural proclivity around a kind of meditation, and some things will go very quickly. Others kind of will struggle at different points. And again, that depends to some extent on our karma, on kleshas, and emotional habit patterns that are problematic for us at any given point in time. Um, and so we want to allow ourselves to recognize that even though the path is presented in a particular way, it's not necessarily that way. It's not a roadmap that is so literal, right? And so my root teacher, Tsuma Dechinzanmo, really didn't like doing visualization practices. She didn't. It just didn't come natural to her. And when she was in retreat, everybody was doing them, and she felt like there was something wrong with her. And her retreat master ended up recognizing that very quickly and said, "Okay, then go with what feels good." And she did, and the rest of her retreat was very powerful. He had her focus on non-conceptual meditation for most of the retreat because he recognized that was her sense of strength, right? So the assuming our own agency is really rooted in understanding who we are and where our strengths lie. And sometimes we can successfully find that ourselves, and sometimes a teacher or sangha can help point that out. So thank you, Sam. And then so Kate asks or says, I just want to say how much I appreciated the instruction last week. A lot of Dharma talks can get repetitive, which I appreciate, is because it can take many times hearing something before you literally take it in, learn from experience. But this practice was so fresh, unlike anything I'm used to. Yay, thank you, Kate. I agree. Sometimes, Dharma talks can be very repetitive, and that's a problem. I was going to try and add something, but I'm going to be fresh and free and move on to the next question, just so that we've got time to go deeper. So as I practice the instructions from last week after a session, I feel a strange daze or exhaustion coming back into my experience over time, almost like oversleeping. But I swear I don't doze off. Is there anything you could say to that? Writes Javier. So that's a good question because it's very common. So a couple things. One thing is we run through life quite often much more tired than we actually think we are. And I can say I'm exhausted right now. I've been up since 4 a.m, and attending to all sorts of stuff, and so my body is quite tired, right? So one thing that's very common when we move into kind of more non-conceptual meditations that don't involve engaging visual consciousness. So even if our eyes are closed and we're visualizing ourselves as Vajrayogini or Amitabha or something like that, are visualizing this to be a wonderful kind of Pure Land, mandala. That kind of engagement of visual consciousness is somewhat stimulating, and that allows us to have a little bit more energy. Same way if we're chanting a liturgy or even just reciting a prayer, there is a sense of focus and all of that. But with shamatha in particular, we're kind of left sometimes with the what's really going on in our body. So that can be, sometimes it could be exhaustion. Now, which can lead to this feeling of dullness. At the same time, sometimes it's not that, and we kind of go off into a little bit of a daze, and that daze can be, I don't want to say a pitfall, but it can be a place of distraction where rather than remaining focused, because this is the weird combination of being focused and relaxed, right? So the focused part is the mind that's stable through shamatha, right? So like when we use our breath, for example, the focus part is, remaining aware of inhalation and exhalation. Right? So just, and you could count, I've known, some people will count to 10 and then start over again. Inhalation, exhalation, 1. Inhalation, exhalation, 2. Inhalation, exhalation, 3. Or, some people will just count inhalation, exhalation, 1. Inhalation, exhalation, 1. Inhalation, exhalation, 1. Right now, what that does is that allows the mind to settle. Right? If the mind doesn't have time or the ability to settle and rest in a kind of quiescence, stability, the calm abiding is another term. When we get into these experiences of resting the mind, in a way so that we're not preoccupied with the past, letting go of the future, letting go of what's happening right now, then sometimes we can kind of almost like just take off like on a plane into a very strange, formless, kind of spacey place. And one of the interesting things about that spacey place is that time can kind of go by relatively quickly, and not much else is happening, which is what makes it less desirable, quote unquote desirable, because we're not looking for going to a particular place, but it's a place that we can get stuck. So I would say that if there's a way to kind of bring your awareness back to the body, right, back to a place of stability, and so that could be done sometimes. They'll say to visualize like a tigle, like a little dot, like the size of a pea. Right, you can visualize it right, kind of between, right in the middle of your brow, and focus your awareness there. All the while, trying to allow your mind to no longer be preoccupied with the future, or the past, or the present, or being active, or being brilliant. And then sometimes it's helpful to visualize the tigle. So the tigle sometimes can be white in the forehead, or it can be black by the navel. And sometimes that kind of grounding, right, allowing the tigle in the navel to kind of bring us back, almost like an anchor, So when we get spacey or diffused, these kinds of things can help us kind of come back to the experience of the moment, because that's not really the experience of the moment. That's kind of, getting a little bit lost. And then another thing you could do is visualize, a Buddha on your head. Or you could focus on a physical object in front of you. Right? So there's a bookcase in front of me. So I could focus on modern tantric Buddhism that's sitting right there on the bookshelf. And use that way of anchoring the mind. So to some extent, even though the instructions include all of these different ways of anchoring the mind, one needs to develop the skill in applying them in a way that's has good effect. And that's kind of one of the tricky things about Mahamudra, is that we want to be able to allow all of these things to happen. And then when these different experiences arise, again, to quote Marpa, to use the Dharma as medicine, right? To correctly apply it in a way that makes the effective change that needs to be made, the slight modulation. So hopefully that's helpful, Javi. And then Anjana writes, I just want to say an enormous thank you, Lama Justin. I have done it over the last week, and it has been wonderful. It was a really tough week, and I found sitting my usual meditation deity a little hard at times because it was so intense. These instructions were grounding and healing, and your presence was in each instruction, which was so beautiful. Thank you. I really felt the letting go of my present in a powerful way, which was my question last time. I do remember that question, and I'm glad that this felt good. So, in relationship to deity practice, I definitely know what you mean. Deity practice can feel very structured, and sometimes like overly structured, and it can, unfortunately, just like anything else in our lives, become habitual. And so sometimes we need to learn how to break the habit of a practice that might be feeling a little old. And the beautiful thing about Mahamudra is that we can blend this into any kind of practice. I'm going to be giving the Cha empowerment next Wednesday, I believe. I think it's Wednesday. You should check the calendar. But like Cha and Mahamudra kind of go hand in hand. It's really beautiful and powerful. And then also Mahamudra and deity practice go really beautifully hand in hand as well. And so the first kind of like major Yidam practice I ever did, I was taught by the previous Bokor Rinpoche, and he spent time kind of asking me to engage in, in some cases you try and visualize the deity as totally real as your own hands, right? That, that your whole form, from the top of your head down to your feet becomes the deity, right? The sound becomes the mantra. And if the deity, again, we'll take Vajrayogini, like Vajrayogini is kind of dancing around and she's got a bone apron, right? And so sometimes it's helpful to kind of imagine the sound, the clinking of that bone apron. There's a halo of flames around her, right? Her hair is up and she's aroused in a very spiritual, passionate way, right? Aroused by the intensity of phenomena. She's dancing, she's semi-wrathful. And so what Bokor Rinpoche would do sometimes is then ask me to make the visualization as big as I could, imagine the universe to be, right? So, so try and take that form, right, which I was associating with this form, right, to make it big and vast and spacious. And then he would say, okay, after you've done that sometime and you've done, some mantra recitation, right? So you've done that. Now make it as small as you can. And this vacillation between big and small. And this playfulness, like, now I'm going to be Vajravarahi on the moon. So there you are dancing on the moon, or on the sun. Allows us to kind of, again, get out of this habit relationship. So, and of course, this is a totally different topic, but I want to touch on it a little bit. When it comes to deity practice, one of the ways these practices manifest later on down the line is, hopefully, we're able to do this is the manifestation of either the impure or the pure illusory body. And one of the keys to kind of, really unlocking the power of that practice is to remember the illusoriness. So the illusoriness of this, and then the illusoriness of the visualization as well. And what we kind of end up experiencing is kind of this blend of the two, that we're here and not here, that we're physical and finite and formed in a particular way, formed kind of in the crucible of a variety of different kinds of experiences, and then at the same time we are space itself. But anyway, so that's kind of like Mahamudra and deity practice, and I'm more than happy to kind of get into that in greater detail in the future. Again, if you want to just come back to this and alternate, again, use the Dharma Lake medicine. Okay, and then this last question is from, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, I'm skipping around. Kimberly, Lama, do you have any recommendations for working with this practice while the experience of sickness or distress in the body? For example, if you feel comfortable sharing, did you work with Mahamudra during your COVID healing process? Thank you. So this is a good question. My COVID healing practice was really kind of focused on, I think, the second part. When I was very actively sick, I found it very hard to concentrate on anything, ironically, other than this kind of, visualized experience I had of this form of Kali, who's also a form of Palden Lamo. So that's actually kind of a little bit more like a deity yoga practice, where for like 4 nights in a row, all I could see at night was was this like emaciated, terrifying image of Kali and Palden Lamo, which I kind of ended up feeling like she was kind of just like destroying everything within my body, both my just destroying the virus, and then ironically helping to just jiggle away some other kind of obscurations and blockages that I was dealing with. Now, that being said, after the real intense, like painful and cough related part of the illness, which I never want to have to go back to, then there was the recovery process. And the recovery process was very gentle and a lot different. And in that way, what I found myself doing was remaining gentle with myself, which means listening deeply. And listening to deeply around what my body needs. And so, and Rod was talking about this a little bit. I believe it was yesterday, talking about getting up or awakening in the morning, and then asking, the first thing he would ask is, what do I need? Right? And so, wrapped up in all of this, so there's shamatha where we can sit, like a statue, and either meditation mudra like that, or right? So laying in bed, recovering, right? And trying, to again, not get fixated on like, oh God, last week was terrible. I'm feeling a change in my body. I hope next week is amazing. So to not get wrapped up in those two things. To not get, okay. I guess that was Kali, who was like, "Don't talk about me so much." So I won't talk about her anymore today. But anyway, again, you can do shamatha laying in bed, recovering, not really, I'm just gonna speak totally freely. The To not obsess, not obsess over what's happening right now, right? Not obsess over what your body's feeling, and just do what feels right. So again, other metaphors than meditation can sometimes be helpful in approaching meditation. So baking is a really lovely one. I love to cook. So the process of cooking, like the first time you try a recipe, let's say you're brand new to cooking and somebody gives you this like Indian recipe that's somewhat, it's not necessarily complex, but there's a technique involved, right? The first time you do it, because you've never done it before, it's probably not going to, it might end up tasting okay, but is it going to really be the way it's supposed to be? Probably not. So this practice of letting whatever happens happen, and kind of coming back, in a systemic way, which is what practice really is, can be very helpful. So hopefully that's a decent answer. I don't want to get fired, or maybe that's okay to get fired. And then Lorna asks, thank you, Kimberly. Or Lorena, my bad, is could you please review the practice? I listened to the recording and it was wonderful. But if you could give a short review, that would be helpful. Should we take one or two of the nails at a time, or watch our mind for those actions arising? Or do we read all 6 nails and have them in our consciousness before each practice? Thanks. Okay, that's a great question. And what I'm going to do is, after this next question, I'll lead us in a session of practice, and then we can kind of go through it again. Okay. So just hang tight, Lorena. And then Irma writes, the word agency is a bit confusing to me. I get some understanding using the contextual clues. However, I still experience some unease. I'm currently reading your book, and thank you for the okayness not to be dogma bound. Yeah, so agency, I mean, it's not like a Dharma word, necessarily. I guess any word is a Dharma word. So agency is really, the way I kind of use it in the book, and then even in this particular context, is, we can either be taught a meditation instruction, or we can, read a book, on like, for example, Tilopa 6 Nails, or read a chapter like in Modern Tantric Buddhism, because Tilopa 6 Nails is in towards the end, in the last section on mind. We can engage those instructions, but then that's only half of it, or not even half in a way. Yesterday evening in the session with Rod, I was talking a little bit about this experience I had when I was studying alchemy in Scotland in the summer of 1995. I was helping to translate or transcribe these early English alchemical manuscripts, and so I spent all day, in a library at the University of Glasgow, just transcribing Old English texts. And it was a beautiful thing, because all the rich imagery found in these alchemical texts would just be almost go right through me, from my eyes down into my hands, and type it out. And you find in the alchemical tradition this kind of relationship between art and nature, right? And so often nature is depicted as a naked woman in these old woodcuts, and art is depicted as a like old scholarly man. And it isn't until, and I suppose you could, reverse genders or have no genders, but the big thing is this binary relationship between nature, which is generative, it is automatic, it is not bound by dogma, it's not bound by structure, it just happens, right? It's kind of like the way seeds grow, right? And they grow into plants. Now, the art part is sometimes, like, for example, we're growing tomatoes. Sometimes you need a stick, inserted in the soil right next to it, and the plant needs to be kind of gently tied to the stick so that it can grow straight, and that the weight of the plant itself doesn't cause it to fall over, right? And so agency is the process of learning how to negotiate our relationship between art and nature. Right? So art in this particular context isn't really the way we know art now, but it's, again, going back to yesterday, the relationship between practice and process. Practice is structural in nature. So Talopa's 6 nails is a meditation practice, right? What that unlocks when we engage it authentically and deeply from within our experience is a process. And that process typically engenders growth. Now, growth is like this crazy, unpredictable thing. Growth could be like, I've become a perfect Buddha in all of the classical ways. Or growth could be, well, I've become a Mahasiddha and I'm going to be, transgressive and I don't particularly care about form or what is sacred and what is not sacred, which is also Buddha-like, right? The agency aspect is moving into this process with intention, which is unique to you. So Irma's intention, a sense of energy, which in this particular case, we're going to call Irma's energy, and a sense of focus. So Irma's focus. And so this relationship between the meditation instruction and all that's arising as a result of the meditation instruction, when we let the actual words of the instruction go and we just rest in that particular experience, what happens is this amazing thing, right? But it's rooted in this kind of very energetic seed that is agency. And agency, I guess we could call something along the lines of willfulness, right? Us applying our own, again, to go back to alchemy, kind of this like inner fire, which we need to make this process happen, right? Agency is, the creative impulse that makes us say, I'm going to sit and practice. Agency is also that impulse that says, my practice is going in this direction that's new and unusual to me. I've never gone through this before. Let me keep going, even though that direction might be like weird. For example, going back to Kali, who I'm not going to mention anymore because I might get cut off. Like, going towards this Hindu practice, right? Or if we are reconnecting with a faith tradition that perhaps we were born into culturally, our agency might lead us back towards some kind of Abrahamic, experience through our Dharma practice, right? So it's really about the way we apply ourselves, if that makes sense. The funny thing about Dharma, or at least the way Dharma is presented, is, when you go to Asia, for example, which I've done many times, and you go to these great teachers and lineage holders and ask for the initiation into a practice, and then, the transmission for the practice, and then the instructions on the practice. Some teachers will, they'll give you the initiation from the text. So they read the text, and they do all the stuff with the bell and the Dharma and, bonk you on the head with things. And then you get then you have the initiation. And then the reading transmission is typically just, the reading of the sacred words of the sadhana, which is important. But then sometimes the instructions themselves are just read from a book. Right? So that's all good. And that's kind of, one of the traditional ways in which, things are transmitted. But what you do with that is related directly to a sense of agency, right? So There's some people that go around and they collect these things. They collect empowerments and transmissions and instructions and never practice. Now, once you start to practice and you sit down with the text and you're reciting it, and if it includes visualization, then you do that. Mantra recitation, you do that, and then eventually things start to happen, right? And so agency in this particular context is the way of gaining. I don't know if this could be a helpful term, but our sea legs in relationship to the growth that's happening, right? And so it's a way of developing maturity in relationship to the experience of awakening, you can say. So anyway, Irma, hopefully that's helpful, and didn't isn't confusing. But I will say agency is something that's definitely under appreciated, or under taught in a lot of places, especially in the US, because it leads to free will. And that free will can be inconvenient for Dharma organizations that really want to, control their students more than just liberate their students. So that's my that's my political rant. Yay! Well, it seems like everyone's getting it, which is great. So now we'll move into a little bit of practice. Okay, bye, Kate. Have a good lunch. Okay, so I'm gonna get out of the question box. I'm getting out of the box. So again, we're gonna do a little bit of meditation, and so as we do this, allow yourself to sit comfortably. And again, we don't have to get back into lotus position or get into it at all. If you can do it, beautiful. Go ahead and do it. And so put your hands on your knees or in the meditation mudra, or if you're laying down, you can kind of fold them over your belly or lay them, on your side, like that. Allow your back to be straight and your chest to be open. Open as if it's receiving direct revelatory experience of the moment. Allow your neck to be slightly bent down. Lips relaxed, like totally free. Tongue just resting on the upper palate. And allow yourself to just breathe naturally. Let every inhalation and exhalation happen. And just settle into that. No particular goal. We're not going anywhere in particular. We're just all going to be here together, all 96 of us. Keep your awareness on your breath and allow your body to remain stable like a mountain. Maintain your awareness on each inhalation and exhalation, and just let it be natural. There's no one gets prized for holding their breath. There's no right way to do it. Just gently remain aware of every inhalation and exhalation as your body settles like a diamond. That's how we settle the body. And now we're going to settle the mind. So as we sit and we allow everything to settle, allow your mind to remain open and free, pliant. Don't recall. Let go of what is past. Don't imagine. Let go of what may come. Don't think. Let go of what is happening right now. Don't examine. Don't try to figure this out right now. Don't control. Don't try to make anything happen in this moment. Just rest. Relax right now and rest. And we'll sit like this for a little while. Just let your mind be free. No past, no future, nothing right now. Just be free. If you get distracted, that's okay. Just bring your awareness back to your breath. Let go of what is past. Don't worry about what might come. Let go of what is happening right now. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't try to make anything happen right now. And again, rest. Relax right now. And rest. Just rest. Allow your mind to be free, expansive, clear, and radiant. And then slowly take a moment to just gently close your eyes. All right. You can let your body relax. Before we come back to the space, this shared space, this shared screen space, just check in and notice what that felt like for you. You don't have to analyze it, but just take a note, a mental note, a snapshot. Almost as if you just created something. Maybe you made a painting. And you're just taking it in. And no judgment if it's good or bad. Just allow yourself to become friends with your experience of meditation. So I'd like to see, for a little bit, anybody had any experiences they want to share. And, I know that it can be a little bit of a shift of gears. But I think it would be probably helpful for one another to kind of just get a sense of what that was like. In that particular context, all 6 snails were kind of introduced at one time, right? In the midst of a meditation experience. Monica writes, I kept finding myself thinking about Janet's void in The Good Place. Lauren writes, I finally spent a lot of time questioning, like, oops, is that thinking? Okay, don't think. I'm thinking about not thinking. Anne writes, peace and tension. Mary writes, I felt a lot of energy in the heart chakra area. Irma wrote, I felt a wholeness. Robin wrote, I feel myself flying apart. It is hard to relax. And these are good. Javi wrote, I felt like melted cheese. Ooh, that sounds delicious. Liz wrote, I've felt a relaxation like when you wake up first thing in the morning with no stress yet. That's beautiful. Excuse me if I butcher your name. I don't intend to. Rangnayaki. I was like submerged in this rich, loomy, black earth ball. That's beautiful. Tremaine, I felt a sense of relief, being rather than doing. Yes. River Rio, whole, fully embodied. Beautiful. Lorena, I felt relaxation and then my irritating to-do list sometimes creeping up, but then I'd come back to my breath. Yeah. Sam, I realized that a huge part of my mind process is imagining more than anything else. I think about things that haven't happened and they aren't going to happen, but they really draw me in. Indrani, wispy, some wandering and dreaming. These are beautiful. Like there's not. And there's a question. Okay, beautiful. I'll just say before the. There we go. And another comment. Oh, Brenda, I felt quiet and empty. Still feel empty. Do not want to come out of this. Yes, me too. So this practice is funny in that and you know, and it's very complicated to kind of talk about it because the words we use often kind of like become overly structural, right? They like crystallize things too much. Like what we're really looking at is almost as if, and I don't think we can only say this to a certain extent. Oh yeah, Lorraine writes, I was just given permission to just rest. My meditations have felt like there's a lot of doing lately. Yeah. So these practices are as if we're holding a mirror to mind, right? And we're not, and there's no like, oh, is my mind beautiful or is it ugly? Is it what I want it to be, or should it be something else? It's not about that. There's nothing, we don't need to apply, any kind of critical analysis. We just need to look. One of the an interesting practice, kind of like a sub practice. There are two, which I really love to do. The first, my root teacher, after she introduced these instructions to me and instructions on shamatha, and her main practice in her retreat was Mahamudra, was to go outside. She had this beautiful kind of patio that overlooked, it's in Sikkim. So there's, mountain and then a valley and then another mountain. So there's, and we were kind of one of the like highest points for a residential location. And so you just look out over space, just like, an unimaginable amount of space to the next mountain. And so we would go out there and practice these instructions together, sometimes sitting, on the ground, other times, sitting on this little kind of like squatty chair where we'd be having tea. So do the practice and have some tea, do the practice and have some tea. It's just very relaxed. But one afternoon, she told me, in the morning, early in the morning when it's still dark, go outside and do this practice while the sun rises, and allow yourself to, anchor your mind on the mountain, on the other side of this valley, right? And it was so amazing to just watch the colors change, as the sun rose. And so in that moment, it really wasn't like what I was engaging in is just the change of the visual field, right? Without judgment. Because, what are you going to be like, I don't like this much light. It's not about that. It's just about watching color change. Right. Another really beautiful way of doing this practice is to be outdoors, and it's actually my preferred place of practice is outside and not inside. And you can go to like a botanic garden or a beautiful place where there are so a wide variety of flowers, and so we're in the spring, and this is a good time to start doing that, and just take it all in. Just sit, allow your body to stabilize, and allow your breath to relax, and allow your kind of mind to anchor somewhat on the visual, and then apply Tilopa's 6 nails. So even if it's a rose garden and there are different kinds of roses, the experience isn't about which rose do I like better. Of course, sometimes that will pop up, but it can be about just the amazing bliss of that particular moment. So many roses, so many colors. Some, are multicolored. And then we will catch things coming up. Oh, I love that. That one's big and round. I love that. Or, oh, I like the way those petals are kind of long and extend outwards. That's fine. Thoughts happen. I mean, that's what the mind does. Like, meditation isn't the process of running away from cognition. Because cognition is very automatic. Meditation is about learning to recognize the cognition for what it is and not be attached to it. right? So, like Sam writing about, imagining, right, and thinking about things that haven't happened and aren't going to happen, yet they draw Sam in, right? So that's okay. So the big kind of like secondary aspect of this practice is automatic recognition of thought activity when it happens, and then letting it go, just completely letting that go, right? So um the I think there's another comment that was similar. um so being hard, it feeling hard to relax as well. What is going on? When we can feel aches and pains, and we can, so there's the physical aspect of not being able to relax, right? That's a thing. It's like drinking a couple of espressos and then trying to sit in meditation. And then there's the mental aspect, right? And so again, there too, like this practice is about gently watch the body as it freaks out, because it will sometimes. The legs will hurt. You know, Sometimes there could be knee pain. Again, our bodies. And again, it's not about having a perfect body, or a body that's um, you know better than another body. Our body is what it is. Sometimes we've got aches and pains. Sometimes those aches and pains are chronic. That's not the issue. The issue then becomes the narrative that we build. Oh God, my knee hurts, and this is so sucky, and I'm only 45, and what am I going to do? This really affects my meditation, and all of a sudden there's this narrative that is just like crushing us. Recognize and let it go. Just let it go. It will still come up. So, it's not like, it will be a permanent let go experience. But there's something tremendously beautiful about that ability of, or developing the ability to recognize and let go. And when we're at our most dynamic, that aspect kind of begins to jump off the cushion as we jump off the cushion and follow us around, right? So, we could be outside, right? So maybe we're going to the grocery store, and all of a sudden you notice there's somebody walking really close to you with no mask on, and you're just like, what the hell, man? And my neighborhood is like that. The people have terrible boundaries. And so you find yourself like getting reactive, which is totally normal, right? Nobody wants COVID. And it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to prevent the transmission of it. And yet, our mind becomes very active. And so there is nothing wrong with recognizing the activity and letting it go. And the letting it go part is learning how to cultivate this kind of union of all of Tilopa's 6 nails into one like big nail, like a big spike. So of letting go of what's past, letting go of what might arise, letting go of what is happening in this moment, right? This person who's got terrible boundaries, and my reaction, like, not trying to figure anything out. Like, what's this person's problem? Or why am I so agitated? Don't even go there. Just let it go. Change it. Change everything. Right? And not in a willful change, but just, when we let things go, the entire experience just shifts. Don't try to make anything happen. Oh, okay, well, I'll visualize that this person's a Buddha getting very close to me. And, no, don't even engage in that, even if it seems meritorious. Don't try to make anything happen. And just relax, rest right now. So in this particular moment, there is a weird person behind me. What am I going to do? Just keep going, So and Lorraine, when you write, I felt you were given permission to just rest, and that your meditations have felt like there's a lot of doing lately. That's the thing about this practice. Like it is deeply intuitive and deep, and again, very easy, Like, you can get into this experience of just like spaciousness in everything that we do, not in a spacey way, but in a way that's automatically forgiving, automatically liberating everything that arises, every thought that arises. We can recognize it, and then we just let it go. Right? We don't follow the thread. Right? We don't need to. Mind moves. That's it. It also doesn't mean we become dumb. It's not like, it's not necessarily an anti-intellectual practice in that regard. Yeah, yeah, and that's, again, and that is important, and again, I think I mentioned last week, there were two people who used to come. I used to run a Dharma center in Brooklyn, and there were two people who used to come very regularly for shamatha instruction, and both of them, their primary concerns. One was a musician who was incredibly brilliant, and the other was a banker who initially came to meditation sessions to be able to, basically like, outdo everyone at work. Like, I want my mind sharp. And the fascinating thing about both of them is they were incredibly resistant to this idea of letting go. Of They're very both concerned about letting go of how intelligent and talented and smart they were. You know, and I used to tell them, there was no, that will still be there. Like, once you get up off that cushion, the musician will still be, thinking about music. The banker will still be thinking about, like, nailing that deal. But while we dedicate ourselves to this practice, let's see what we can learn about that whole process of cognition, right? And then let's see if we can experience where um, our suffering lies in relationship to that. And what could awakening look like? And it was amazing because the banker ended up very naturally transitioning into understanding the disparities in his relationship with his partner, and how all of a sudden he realized that he can be very impatient, and that he wasn't a good listener, and that he automatically, assumed that his partner was judging him. And he was recognizing a lot of his neurosis. And it wasn't that we were like, talking, like, it wasn't like talk therapy where we were talking about, what's been going on in his life experience. This was all just born out of watching his mind, right? Watching how, yes, I can be judgmental. Like, I am, not only am I trying to figure something out, but I'm trying to make something happen. Right. And so I was particularly enthused by one of these comments here. I mean, I'm enthused by all of them, but somebody wrote about how and well, I guess I'm sorry, Sam. I don't mean to keep coming back to Sam's comment, but realizing that a huge part of my mind process is imagining, and so it's almost as if, like, these are different places where we get stuck. I'll give you like an example from my life yesterday. So I had to lead a virtual prayer service with some of, like, some influential New York City clergy this morning at the city's Potter's Field. And there was one clergy person who wasn't part of it, but who's part of this process, who really doesn't like me. And so he was sending me these emails that were like very kind of inappropriate, and kind of meant to kind of mess with me. And so naturally, I found myself becoming anxious, right? And that experience of anxiety affected my sleep. And I woke up, and this thing was ridiculously early in the morning, and I attended to it, and it went very well. But this I was wrapped up last night in this anticipation of like, oh God, I hope this person isn't part of this, right? So I'm like in the future, right? And then I'm frustrated by the experience. So like, I'm trying to like, in that moment, like wrapped up with what's happening right now. Like, oh gosh, why is this happening? Like, why is this guy such a pain in my butt? Like, why am I so like, and then it gets deeper. Like, why am I so activated by him and blah 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 blah. So what these six nails can also be a very useful way of kind of learning how to recognize the different places that we get stuck, which again allows us to kind of untie them as if they're knots. Like, okay, and I got to work on just letting go of worrying about tomorrow. Which we all go through at different points in our lives. As Lorena, I totally get frustrated all the time. Maybe more than both of you. So, it's not like I figured anything out. Um, um, and Robin wrote, I feel like my mind keeps looking for evidence of safety or danger, and I guess I'm overwhelmed noticing how much effort I exert in assessing safety. Safety is an illusion my mind and my body know, but I'm scared in a deeply primal way that is very tricky to sit with. Yeah, this is a crazy time, in so many different ways. Like, I think if I could say one thing to everybody here, it's that meditation is not about changing all of this, this uncertainty, this kind of like, especially for like, so in New York, like the COVID crisis is stabilizing, right? But there are other parts of the country where it's beginning to arise, right? And then people are having to deal with that. And then there's crazy protesters who are pushing people's buttons. And then there's, all of the unemployment and the economic fallout. There's so much going on. I totally get that. Meditation helps us, again, it's here and here. Here in the sense that we kind of, stupidly, I think as humans automatically assume that all thinking happens here. But a lot of our thinking probably happens in our heart. Meditation helps us transform the experience of the moment from an experience that promotes our own suffering and our anxiety, which leads to really sometimes the harming other people, right? Because we get so reactive, and then it means, just automatically almost like, energetically needs to like be transmitted to somebody else, right? It helps us in that respect, in that, well, we become less reactive. We're able to accept, lovingly and patiently, and not necessarily from the get-go, but with practice, let things arise and let them go, right? And so that leads to a change or transformation of the world around us, in the sense that the more people who are able to cultivate that experience means that we have people out in the world who are able to kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of terraform the world. The more people we have who are able to allow things to arise and let go and experience the wisdom and experience with direct clarity what's happening, right? Without harming, without reacting, without overreacting, makes the world a better place and allows the world to transform. It transforms the decisions we make. It transforms our understanding of interdependence. Transforms our relationship to the environment. And then, of course, in more kind of inner esoteric ways, it transforms our relationship to time, transforms our relationship even to the Lama. When we're able to really deeply engage these six nails, everything that arises becomes our teacher. right? So the frustrations become our teacher. A sense of fear that might arise around letting go becomes our teacher. All of these things become our teacher. Imagining becomes our teacher. All of these things. Melted cheese becomes our teacher. I want melted cheese to be my teacher every day. Wholeness becomes our teacher. The relationship between peace and tension becomes our teacher. And I don't mean that in like the cheap sense of like, like new agey, oh, this is my teacher. No, it's true. Like every experience we have, related to temperature, related to hunger, related to desire, related to pleasure, all of these things become our teacher. They become this affirming way through which we interact with not only the world around us, but that simultaneous experience that happens the moment we experience something, and that external object and the internal experience happens at the same time, becomes this amazingly powerful and beautiful relationship. And that's another key to what Mahamudra is all about. And of course, anxiety. And so Lauren writes, this is so helpful right now. The unknown of everything happening and what's next for society or for me, or illness or wellness, or all of the ways I can imagine is so hard. Maybe it's like the world is a bed of nails. Meditation helps us to learn how to walk across them. Yeah, there's this this is in the Bodhi Charya Avatara, or Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva. There's this kind of quote about the world, and so he says that we could either cover the world with leather so that we could walk barefoot over everything, or we could cover our own feet, like with shoes, basically. And of course, it doesn't have to be leather. So it could be rubber, it could be hemp, it could be whatever it is. It could be wood, it could be ice. But the point is, we can look to transform the entire thing around us, right? Or we could transform our minds. And it's not one at the expense of the other. But again, when we talk about wanting to affect change and be a positive influence for others and change the world around us, we're much more effective when we can be more effective. And meditation aids, and Mahamudra in particular aids in that. It allows us to be dynamic beyond words. So with that, maybe we'll close here because we've come to the end of the time. I do want to encourage you all to keep doing this practice. Rod and I know that the retreat is coming to a close next week, but we are beginning to work with core organizers to see what practices will extend, maybe on a weekly basis as an offering to the community. And I think that this is one of the ones that will. Just give us some time and we'll put together practice sessions, and then also these teaching sessions as well, so that we can keep going with Tilopa Six Nails, with Shamatha, and then also start with time to look at other Mahamudra texts. There are a ton of them, and some of them are quite beautiful. And thankfully, most of them are in song form, which just gives them a much better kind of intuitive feel than some like terse, philosophical text. So I want to thank you all very, very much. I also just want to express my gratitude for your presence and your energy. and your practice. And I'm going to keep you all in my heart. And yeah, to be continued.